I used to be so ashamed of eating alone in high school that I would rather sit with people who clearly didn't want me there than face an empty lunch table by myself. I thought loneliness was a disease, something broken inside me that needed fixing, but I was wrong about everything. Picture this, 17-year-old me standing in the cafeteria doorway, scanning for any group that might tolerate my presence for 30 minutes. I would gravitate toward people who would whisper among themselves right in front of me, laugh about inside jokes I knew nothing about, and feign niceness to my face while clearly wishing I would disappear. And here's the pathetic part. I knew they didn't want me there. I could feel their discomfort, see their fake smiles, hear their conversations stop when I approached. But I convinced myself that if I just tried harder, if I was more useful, more entertaining, more whatever they needed, they would eventually accept me. That somehow, my persistence would transform their tolerance into genuine friendship. It never happened. Of course it never happened. But in my teenage mind, sitting with people who didn't want me was infinitely better than the alternative, being seen eating alone. Because in my head, eating alone meant something was fundamentally wrong with me. It meant I was unlovable, unlikable, a social outcast. It meant broadcasting to the entire cafeteria that I was defective. What I didn't understand then was that my fear of being alone wasn't really about being alone. It was about what I thought being alone said about me. I had internalized this toxic idea that your worth as a person is measured by how many people want to be around you. That solitude equals rejection, and rejection equals worthlessness. So I would choose bad company over no company, again and again. I would laugh at jokes that weren't funny, agree with opinions I didn't share, and pretend to enjoy conversations that bored me to tears. All because I thought the alternative, sitting by myself, would expose me as the fundamentally flawed person I believed myself to be. The irony is devastating when I think about it now. I was so afraid of being alone that I surrounded myself with people who made me feel more alone than if I had actually been by myself. Everything changed when I moved to the States. Suddenly, I didn't have the luxury of fake friends. I didn't have anyone. For the first time in my life, I was forced to confront the thing I had been running from, being alone in public. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't a beautiful awakening. It was necessity. I was hungry. The dining hall was open, and my options were simple. Eat alone or don't eat at all. So I ate alone. And you know what happened? Absolutely nothing. No one pointed. No one whispered. No one even looked in my direction long enough to form an opinion about my solitary meal. The earth didn't crack open. Lightning didn't strike me down. I just ate in peace, and it was fine. It wasn't an instant revelation, but a slow accumulation of experiences that completely shattered my understanding of how the world worked. I started going to movies alone and discovered that sitting in a dark theater is actually a sublime experience. Why did I need someone next to me to validate my enjoyment of a film? I walked to the beach by myself and found that the ocean didn't care if I had company. The sunset was just as beautiful whether I was sharing it with someone or experiencing it alone. Maybe more beautiful actually, because I wasn't distracted by the need to perform or comment on every moment. I ate at nice restaurants alone and realized that the servers didn't treat me like a charity case. Other diners weren't shooting me pitying looks. In fact, most people were so absorbed in their own conversations and meals that they didn't even notice me. That's when it dawned on me. Nobody gives a flying duck whether you're eating alone or not. But here's what really blew my mind. This fear of being alone with ourselves isn't new. We've always been running from our own minds. There's a Zen story about a monk and his student. The student asked his master, "Why do we get dressed, eat, and sleep every day?" The master replied, "We dress, we eat." When the student said he didn't understand, the master responded, "If you don't understand, put on your clothes and eat your food." This story actually reveals something about our desire to seek a deeper meaning in our ordinary experience. The key to note is that the deeper meaning is within our ordinary experiences. Even hundreds of years ago, before smartphones, before social media, Before our modern arsenal of distractions, humans were struggling to be present with themselves. We've always preferred mental noise to mental silence. But think about this. In ages past, people would walk miles to get water from a well. Miles, with no music in their ears, no podcasts to occupy their minds, no phones to scroll through. Just them, their thoughts, and the rhythm of their footsteps. And somehow, they survived it. They didn't go insane from the silence. They didn't implode from the lack of stimulation. What happened to us? When did we become so afraid of our own minds that we'd rather endure bad company than good solitude? There's this research study that perfectly illustrates how terrified we are of being alone with ourselves. Researchers put participants in a blank room, and I mean completely blank, nothing to look at, nothing to do, for just 15 minutes. 15 minutes. That's less time than most of us spend waiting in line at the grocery store. But here's the twist. There was a button in the room that would deliver an electric shock, not a pleasant buzz, an actual painful shock. These were normal people, not masochists or thrill seekers, just regular humans asked to sit quietly with their thoughts for a quarter of an hour. And an overwhelming majority chose to shock themselves rather than sit in silence. Let me repeat that. People would rather experience physical pain than be alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. What is it about our internal landscape that's so terrifying? What demons are we carrying around in our heads that make electric shock seem like the better option? I know exactly what those demons look like because I've been running from them too. When you can't stand to be alone with yourself, when you need constant external validation and stimulation, it poisons everything else in your life. I've experienced the devastating cost of not loving myself. I let relationships deteriorate because I was so focused on my flaws that I couldn't see past my own tunnel vision. I would sabotage my own goals, ignore emails that could improve my life, avoid networking with people who could help my career, all because deep down, I didn't believe I deserved good things. I took too long to change for the better. I let someone I loved wait too long for me to become the person I was capable of being. And the worst part, my inability to sit comfortably with myself meant I couldn't offer genuine love to anyone else. How can you give what you don't have? How can you love someone else when you're constantly running from yourself? Because here's the thing, when you don't love yourself, your entire outlook becomes one of not loving. You become a person who hurts the people they care about, not out of malice, but out of this deep unconscious belief that you're not worthy of the good things in your life. But I want to make something crystal clear. There's a massive difference between being alone and feeling lonely. And understanding this distinction literally changed my life. Being alone is a circumstance. Feeling lonely is an emotion. You can be surrounded by people and feel crushing loneliness. I know because I lived it for years, sitting with those fake friends in high school, and you can be completely alone and feel perfectly content, connected to yourself and the world around you. The problem isn't solitude. The problem is that we've been taught to fear it. We've been programmed by societal expectations to believe that being bored, being quiet, being unstimulated is somehow wrong or dangerous. But what if it's not? What if boredom is just your mind's way of asking for space to breathe? What if silence is an invitation to actually get to know yourself? When I sit alone with my thoughts now, I've learned to let whatever feels uncomfortable just surface and be with it. I don't immediately reach for my phone or put on music to drown out the discomfort. I observe it. I get curious about it. Some of my best ideas come from long runs by myself, from quiet moments when I'm not trying to fill every second with input. We live in a world that profits from our inability to be alone. Social media companies make billions because we'd rather scroll through strangers' lives than examine our own. Streaming services thrive because we need constant background noise to avoid the terrifying prospect of silence. But I'm not perfect either. I catch myself doom scrolling, reaching for distractions when difficult emotions arise. The difference is that now I recognize it for what it is, an escape mechanism. And sometimes, instead of automatically reaching for my phone, I pause. and ask myself what I'm trying to escape from. Usually, it's some version of the same fear. Am I enough? Am I doing the right thing? Am I lovable? These are the questions that live in the silence, and they're scary because they don't have easy answers. But here's what I've discovered. The silence isn't trying to torment you with these questions. It's trying to help you have a conversation with yourself. It's offering you the chance to hear from parts of yourself that get drowned out by all the noise. So let me ask you the question that cuts through all the BS. Would you date yourself? I'm serious. If you met someone exactly like you, with your habits, your emotional patterns, your way of treating yourself and others, would you want to be in a relationship with that person? When I first asked myself this question, my honest answer was no. And that was devastating, but necessary to acknowledge. I wouldn't date myself because I was inconsistent, self-sabotaging, and too focused on my flaws to appreciate my strengths. I was someone who needed constant external validation, who couldn't sit comfortably with silence, who hadn't learned to enjoy my own company. And if I wouldn't date myself, how could I expect anyone else to? How could I blame others for not wanting to be around me when I didn't even want to be around myself? But here's the beautiful thing about this question. It's not a judgment. If your answer is no, it's not because you're fundamentally broken. It's because you haven't learned how to love yourself yet, and that's learnable. Loving yourself actually looks like being able to sit alone in silence without panic. It looks like taking yourself on dates, to movies, to restaurants, to places you've always wanted to go. It looks like treating yourself with the same kindness you'd show a friend. It means going on adventures by yourself, not as a consolation prize for not having company, but as a gift you give yourself. It means recognizing that your relationship with yourself is the longest relationship you'll ever have, so you might as well make it a good one. I'm still learning this. I'm still working on becoming someone I would want to date. But the difference is that now I see solitude as an opportunity, not a punishment. Every moment alone is a chance to understand myself better, to sit with my thoughts without immediately judging them, to practice being present with whatever arises. So here's my invitation to you. Stop treating loneliness like a disease that needs curing. Stop running from your own mind like it's the enemy. Your thoughts aren't trying to destroy you. They're trying to tell you something important about what you need, what you value, what you're afraid of. The next time you feel the urge to fill silence with noise, to choose bad company over good solitude, to reach for your phone instead of sitting with discomfort, pause. Just for a moment, ask yourself what you're trying to escape from. Get curious instead of critical. You might discover that the person you've been running from, yourself, is actually worth getting to know. You might find that your own company, when you give it a real chance, is better than any fake friendship you've ever settled for. Because at the end of the day, everyone else will eventually leave. Jobs end, friends move away, relationships change. But you're stuck with yourself for life, so you might as well learn to enjoy the company. Loneliness is not something to fix. Loneliness isn't the problem. Our fear of it is. The solution isn't to never feel alone. The solution is to become someone you actually want to be alone with. And that journey, it starts with 15 minutes of silence and the courage to listen to what your own mind has been trying to tell you all along.